It's once again time to update your Steam Deck. How's it going, everyone, and welcome to Deck Ready. In this update, I've got 2.5 little stories for you. We finally got some new Steam Deck updates, and they're working on one for the future that I think is going to be absolutely incredible, maybe even game-changing. But before I jump into it, I gotta say thank you so much for getting me over 10,000 subscribers. I was at Disneyland, I pulled out my phone, and I was like, Kelsey, my fiance, I hit 10,000 subscribers on Deck Ready, and everyone around me fell to their knees and started crying, and their eyes melted out of their heads, and Mickey Mouse caught on fire. It was absolutely insane. All jokes aside, thanks so much for helping me get here, and now we're on the road to 50K. All right, so last week I was looking around the internet and I was sitting there like, why are there so few Steam Deck updates happening? Valve has been putting out multiple updates a week. Since this thing launched right around my birthday back at the beginning of March, we've basically gotten a new software update for the Steam Deck every single week, and then Valve just went completely quiet. But it turns out they had a really good and well-deserved reason. I actually didn't know this before I started working on this video, but I guess one of the big perks of working at Valve is that you get an 8-day, all expenses paid vacation to Hawaii for you and your family every year. The vacation traditionally happens in April, and we kind of put some dots together based on a tweet from Lawrence Yang, who, if you haven't heard of him before, is one of the designers working on the Steam Deck over at Valve, and he's a great follow on Twitter because he talks about all the newest features coming to the device and also talks about why they chose to implement them. He's a great follow. I don't feel like I need to sell this. He's a designer at Valve working on the Steam Deck. Everyone watching this channel cares about the Steam Deck and probably cares about what he has to say. Anyway, just a few days ago, he tweeted out, "I work at the coolest place," and also included a picture of these adorable little Steam Deck pins. They're all on vacation. One of them has a Hawaiian volcano island on his head. Another one has a little flower in its ear. Another one has a lei and a sun behind it. And another one has a snorkel. I gotta say, I like the snorkel one. I love swimming, but you can pick your fighter down in the comments below. So basically what that means is that Valve has either just started, is in the middle of, or has just wrapped up their Hawaiian vacation. Either way, everyone over there totally deserves this vacation. The only reason I'm talking about it is it kind of explains why the updates have been a little light. But there's some evidence that the vacation has just ended because there's a new update for your Steam Deck underneath the stable branch, for those of you out there who are too scared to wade into the fields of beta updates. So if you go into settings and look to update your firmware, you're going to be able to see all the features that come along with this update, and there's actually some pretty cool ones. First up, if you're on the home screen of your deck, you're going to see a carousel related to the Great on Deck section of your library. Now, I have a ton of games on Steam. I think I have over 650 of them, which is crazy. I bought a lot of Humble Bundles over the years, so having those Great on Deck games just sitting right there, ready for me to download, install, and play is awesome. Going back to the fact that I have over 600 games on Steam, they improve performance when you're sifting through a massive library like that. Now, if you go to the library, you can hold the right trigger or the left trigger to scroll between letters of your library. It's still a little slow, it has a little bit of stuttering, but it's a big improvement over how it worked before. So I thank you, Valve, for that. And finally, thanks to Gaming on Linux, we also got clarification along with this update on whether or not there's a difference in performance of the CPU, whether you're in desktop mode or game mode. And like I mentioned, this was thanks to Gaming on Linux, but the person who's telling us is a coder at Valve named Pierre. They said there's no difference in actual available CPU resources between game mode and desktop mode, but game mode has a tweak to expose the CPU as 8 cores and 8 threads instead of 4 cores and 8 threads. This lets several games pick 6 or 8 threads instead of 4, yielding big games from SMT scaling. Now, I'm gonna be real, I get the gist of what they're saying, but a lot of that hardcore info at the end went over my head. Basically, the key here is that the Steam Deck CPU performs the same whether you're in desktop mode or game mode. It was just a visual difference that people were identifying. That's good because if I was playing a game like Elden Ring in game mode where it has some drops below 30 frames per second, I'd sit there wondering if it would run better in desktop mode, and even if it was a placebo, I don't want to have to switch back and forth between desktop and game mode, especially when I'm on the go. If I'm on my desktop, I want to use the desktop mode. If I'm on the go or sitting on the couch, I want to use game mode. I'm just glad that we got the clarification that there really is no big difference, at least regarding the CPU. So last week aside, I think Valve is doing a really good job making sure that the stable update isn't too far behind the beta update. There's still some features in the beta update we got a couple weeks ago that haven't made it over to stable. I'm on the beta branch of the SteamOS software, and I'm gonna be real, I can't tell the difference between that and the stable branch. Back when the thing came out, there was a big difference between between the beta one. I was having issues like if I put it into sleep mode, game sound would still play. Some games were crashing more. I had to restart my Steam Deck a couple of times, so I switched it back to the stable version of the software. But recently when I switched over to the beta, at least with this current version, there hasn't been a perceivable difference to me in performance. I haven't had games crashing. I haven't ran into that sound issue, even though that was fixed a long time ago. I really haven't ran into many issues at all with the Steam Deck, which is a great scenario to be in. There are two big features I'd really like to see come as soon as possible, one of them being full dual booting supported by Valve on the Steam Deck. So right now, there really isn't anything stopping you from partitioning your SSD and installing Windows on it. You can find a guide on YouTube, which is great, but it's a little bit more complicated than I would like it to be. That's why I haven't really done it yet. I've also tried running Windows 11 off a micro SD card, which people pointed out will kill the lifespan of your micro SD. I just wanted to see if it worked so I could play Destiny 2, and it did work pretty well, so that's another option. But the best option for me, I think, is going to be just partitioning off around 150 gigabytes of my SSD, putting Windows 11 on there, and installing Destiny 2, because that is the only game that I really want to play on my Steam Deck that I can't right now, which I guess is good for Valve. It really shows how many games are running on the Steam Deck. It's just the main game I play the most isn't running all that well if you are using Windows right now, which brings me to the next thing I want, which is the rest of the drivers we're still waiting on. We have some really important ones right now, like specifically the graphics driver, which is great, and the micro SD card driver and the USB-C port. But one thing we still don't have is headphone jack support or speaker support. So the only way to use sound with Windows games right now is to use a Bluetooth headset, which I don't need to tell you that that isn't ideal. I have been using and trying out some Bluetooth headphones with the Steam Deck. I'm going to include them in a video next week where I'm traveling with my Steam Deck, but still, we should be able to use the speakers and the headphone jack on the Steam Deck. Hopefully we don't have to wait too much longer for those drivers to come out. So this next story I have for you guys is a little complicated, but it's pretty cool. So you probably saw that the YouTuber who makes Steam Deck videos and other gaming handheld videos, The Fox, put out a video where he was able to limit the Steam Deck screen to 40 hertz. The big caveat, of course, is that he was only able to do it in Windows mode, but why would you want to limit the hertz of your Steam Deck? Now, I became aware of this 40 FPS/hertz movement back when Insomniac Games updated Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on the PlayStation 5 to have a 40 FPS mode that has all the visual effects turned on if you have a 120 hertz monitor. Now, the thing about 30 frames per second is that it's still going to look pretty smooth whether you're on a 60 hertz monitor or a 120 hertz monitor, but 40 hertz does not divide into 60, while it does divide into 120. But basically, if you're playing a game on a 60 hertz monitor at 60 frames per second, you're going to see a single frame for 16.7 milliseconds. But if you're running a game at a frame rate that doesn't evenly divide into your monitor's refresh rate, you'd be seeing a frame for different amounts of time. So you might see one frame for 16.7 milliseconds, and then you'll see the next frame for 33 milliseconds, which causes stutter when you're panning the camera. I hate stutter on its own, but on top of that, it can even cause screen tearing, which is the thing that plagued the Xbox 360 generation and has unfortunately come back on the PlayStation 5 if you don't have a variable refresh rate TV. I get it all the time in Far Cry 6. It is so annoying seeing screen tearing in 2022. But if you're playing on a monitor that supports 120 hertz, if you're playing at 30 frames per second, it'll still look smooth because 30 divides into 120. But if you're playing at 40 frames per second, you see more frames overall that also display at an even frame time because 40 also divides into 120. Unfortunately, the Steam Deck screen is 60 hertz and 40 doesn't divide into 60. So unfortunately, even if you limit a game to 40 frames per second on the 60 hertz monitor, it's not going to look as smooth as it would if the monitor was running at a hertz that 40 could divide into. So knowing all of that, the Fox switched over to Windows on his Steam Deck and made it so that the screen is running at 40 hertz. And since most AAA games can easily run at 40 frames per second locked while they can't run at 60, they'll look so much smoother than if they were running at 30 frames per second on the 60 hertz screen. So obviously the solution there would be for Valve to put in the work and make it so that the Steam Deck screen on the SteamOS side of the equation could be limited to 40 hertz. And that seemed like a lot more work to me than Valve would really need to do for the Steam Deck, but it's been confirmed that they are actively working on getting a 40 hertz toggle activated on the SteamOS side of the Steam Deck. The same coder named Pierre I talked about earlier said on Twitter in response to the Fox, "We've been really excited to bring refresh rate switching to deck to deliver smooth frame pacing in arbitrary FPS limit scenarios, but the current screen blanking time when switching is a bit much. We've been doing work behind the scenes to improve it, coming soon." Now, I'm very familiar with screen blanking time because my laptop that I mainly game on, my Razer Blade 15 Advanced, it has 160 65 hertz screen, but in the Razer software that comes along with it, you can actually set the screen to run at 60 hertz. And when you do that, it makes it seem like the computer is about to just blow up, like the screen goes black, stuff moves around the screen. It is not an elegant looking thing. And I'd assume it's a very similar situation on the Steam Deck. So while I'm glad that they have this working already, I can see why they'd want to hold back the feature over at Valve until they can get that screen blank time as short as possible. Because if you're just like a normal console gamer who bought the Steam Deck because it seems like a more powerful Nintendo Switch, and you manage to head into the menu and you see hertz switching, what is this all about? And then you switch your Steam Deck to 40 hertz and the screen just goes black for 30 seconds, that's gonna freak that person out, and rightfully so. But I'm a person who knows what's going on here. I'd really like to play games at 40 frames per second. I know Elden Ring could hit that. I know Control could hit that. I know God of War could hit that. I know pretty much any AAA game you throw at the Steam Deck could easily hold at 40 frames per second at high settings. So Valve, please just add it to the beta branch. I'm fine with that screen off time being a little bit longer than it should be. And then when it's totally ready, you can just add it to the stable branch. You know, that seems like a good scenario to me. Either way, it seems like this update is coming sooner rather than later because they've already got it working on the Steam Deck over at Valve. So hopefully we don't have to wait too long for it, because again, I really want 40 hertz so I can play my games at 40 FPS. And if you stuck through all those numbers, I really want to let you know I appreciate you. So here on the screen right in front of me is a Steam code for God of War. Whoever gets it, I hope you enjoy the game.